Beep beep. Hi, and welcome to today's video. What are we going to be doing? Well, I've got to fix an oil leak on Oscar. All Land Rovers leak oil, especially the series vehicles, and some say it's actually the only way, that there's oil in them. I actually do think that when you first get a Land Rover, you should drain all places where there should be oil just to see how much is in them. As I found out with Oscar when I first got in, that there's actually only a cupful in the gearbox. So it was good to know. Anyway, we're going to fix the sump gasket on Oscar because it's dripping a bit too much. Now, it's not because of poor workmanship or anything like that. It's because the gasket that was used when he was put back together following his recommission was a cheap one done by Britpart. And so what you like about Britpart, they make a huge range of parts, and I think we should be thankful for that. But I found that some haven't been that good. So I'm going to replace the sump gasket with one that I found from Turner Engineering. Now, they are very well known in Land Rover circles, and they sell a slightly thicker, sort of more card papery based gasket. So here is that gasket, and it is, you can see probably just a little bit by the way it flexes that it's quite a thick cardboard sort of feel to it. And it's a fairly simple operation to put this on the car. But what I thought that we would do is check out what information is out there from Land Rover as well on how to do this job. I think you'll be pleasantly unsurprised. Okay, I've got 3 books to show you here. Firstly is the original Land Rover Series 3 Owner's Manual. Now, it's quite telling really that there are a lot of jobs in here that they recommended owners should do or could be able to do on fettling and keeping your Land Rover going. Replacing the sump gasket isn't one of them, but they do have things like fault finding, electrical diagrams, how to adjust the tappets, the brakes, you name it. It's quite detailed. Maybe they knew that Land Rovers weren't going to be that reliable, or maybe it's because they're off in the wilds and you needed a nice little book handy for all those little bits of maintenance. So this one doesn't work for us. Now, here's a bit of history for you. This is my original Haynes manual that I bought when I was 17 years old, when I had my very first Series 3, which is this vehicle here, by the way. I'm still trying to find it. If anyone knows where ADT 117T is, I would love to hear about it. Apparently it is still insured, but it's been sawned and it's off the road for over a decade. But it's out there somewhere, and I'd love to know what condition it's in now. Anyway, the Haynes manual actually is very good at this. And if I find the right page, just bear with me a second. The Haynes manual actually has quite a lot of good information. So, it says sump removal. The sump can be removed quite easily with the engine still in place. That's true. First, drain the engine oil into a suitable container. Don't just tip it on the floor. The Land Rover has considerable ground clearance, and it's possible to remove the sump without raising the vehicle. This is also true, although if you put your car up on some sort of ramps, I've got some sleepers which I've cut at an angle, and I drive my vehicle onto those just to give me a little bit of extra room underneath. It says use heavy-duty axle stands, blah, blah, blah. Unscrew and remove all of the sump bolts, releasing them only 1/2 turn at a time in a diagonal sequence to avoid distortion. Now that's the type of detail I like. It's some good advice. It says if the sump is stuck tight, run a blunt knife round the gasket to release it. I don't think I'll have that problem. But I like the fact that they talk about the fact that you go diagonally, as you would with the cylinder head bolts, to make sure that you don't overstress it and you don't cause any issues. And I'm sure if I was to find sump refitting, it would say the absolute opposite and say that. Right. If you're a serious Land Rover person, you've probably got one of these. This is for the Series 3, but there's a whole load in the back of here. There's like dozens and dozens of different manuals for different vehicle variants. This is the official repair operation manual. Now, I went to this thinking this will have much more detail. It'll just be fantastic. Let's have a look and see what we find. So here's what Land Rover say. I'm sure it'll be extremely detailed. Oil sump, removing. Remove the sump plug and drain off the lubricating oil. Withdraw the dipstick. Remove the fixings at the sump flange. Lower the sump to clear the oil strainer and withdraw. Withdraw the joint washer. mean, I know it's not a complex job or anything, but you'd think they'd give you a little bit more than that. No wonder the Haynes manuals became so popular in their day and still are to this day. So it's an easy job. I knew it was going to be easy, but I was looking for that type of advice about just doing it in a particular sequence to make sure that I didn't ruin anything. And of course, when you put the new gasket on, you don't want to over tighten one particular bolt at any one time, because it could then squeeze that gasket too much, and that could cause the leak or cause the gasket to move slightly. So you've got to do them all up gradually. And just so that you know in advance, the torque wrench setting for the Sump bolts is 12 Newton meters. So let's get on with the job. Get the overalls on. Let's get under the car. Oh dear, oh dear. As you can see, this is the one that's been underneath Oscar's Sump for ages. It's pretty sodden with drips of oil. That's, you know, it's a year and a half's worth, granted, and that's a new piece that was on just in the last few weeks, but it's enough to warrant getting this fixed. So this won't come as a surprise to anyone with a Land Rover, but there's the Sump plug on the left, and we're going to undo that and then gradually undo all the Sump bolts around the edge of the Sump. Very nice and easy. Just while the oil's draining out, I'm just removing this copper washer from the Sump plug. And it's a little bit difficult at first, but it's just unscrewing now. So give that thread a clean and use a new washer. Right, so that's pretty much done now. So I'm just going to put the Sump back in with a new washer. Sump plug, I should say. There we go. Oil's just starting to drip. There's about 0.85 of a litre in this. There you have it. Time to drain the oil away. If you've not got yourself one of these, I can really recommend it. They make getting rid of the oil a much cleaner affair, rather than old washing up bowls that I used to use. And then you can just sit that up like that and just let that drain in. So this is the inside of your oil filter holder. Big long threaded screw, there's a spring in the end there. I've just cleaned that out just to get any rubbish out. But the new filter goes on there, keep it central. New O-ring at the top, and away you go. So we're going to undo all of those, degrease it, take the Sump down. I'm sure there'll be a lot more oily mess, and that's why I've got this cardboard down on the ground. But we'll undo those gradually, half a turn at a time, in a fairly diagonal fashion, and take the Sump out. You get to see the inside of the engine. Turn. There's one. 2. Just very carefully going around and checking the bottom of the engine lump with this razor blade, just to check that there's no bits of paper gasket, but being very careful not to scratch at all, just making sure there's no old paper and gunge there. So I shall do that all the way around. So there's a bit here, there's a bit coming off there, a bit at the front, could be a bit of blue Hylamar left over. I'm just going to clean it all up all the way around, so we've got a nice flat surface. You can see that, look there on the blade. Let's get it all off. Interesting to note that the sump washer, the gasket, only fits in one direction. You'll notice that that hole doesn't line up. But if we flip it over, put it on roughly, you can see they all line up now. Kind of handy. That means it must go that way. So, I've got my new filter in here, new O-ring. So I'm just going to crawl underneath and now put this in place. It takes a little bit of jiggery pokery just to line it up and make sure this doesn't fall out, but hopefully that will go to plan. Well, just stopping for lunch. So the sump's off, it's all clean, it's scraped, the underneath is all clean and scraped as well. It's just dripping the final bits of oil out of the oil pump, and then I'm going to very swiftly, in one operation, go around, wipe all the gasket area on the bottom of the block, get that underneath, get 2 bolts in, and very quickly just pinch a couple up just to hold the sump in place, and then can go around diagonally just adding the bolts in. They've all had a petrol bath and a little bit of a scrub with an old toothbrush just to get any crud out of the threads, so hopefully it'll all go back together okay. Fingers crossed it leaks a little bit less. I'm not expecting it to be leak free. It's a 42-year-old car, so we'll just have to see. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to have my lunch. Conscious of the fact that I didn't just video me getting the sump up under the car. I tell you what, I'm glad I've raised the car because there wouldn't be much room. You can see that the gasket sort of lines up in the holes. Just be a case of sorting out the threads. I've just got a few bolts holding it in place loosely. That one in the centre at the back obviously is a nut and washer rather than a bolt, but I'll just gradually go around. I've already done the filter there, you can see, and hopefully that won't leak. So we're just going to go and check on Oscar, see if he's leaking oil. Moment of truth. Let's go in. Well, inevitably there is a drip, but one drip like that is a lot less than he was dripping. Let's see if we can see where it's coming from. Annoyingly, it is actually coming from the sump washer, and I have tightened that up once already. I don't want to over tighten it, so maybe it's just destined to drip from there forever. There's no sign of oil coming from above there, so the sump is definitely drier. And the oil filter also dry at the moment. I'm sure it won't last long. Well, I think that was a worthwhile exercise. The sump gasket itself is dry, but it is dripping from that sump washer. Maybe that was an inferior washer. That was actually made by Britpart, funnily enough. Take from that what you will. Anyway, I'm not going to do that again in a hurry, but it's good to do a new job. I hope it's been informative for you and it spurs you on. If you've got any hints, comments, tips, etc., just put it in the comments box afterwards and I'll see them at some point, I'm sure. It's been great to speak to you again. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Bye.